All right, friends, this is the recording of our first Enneagram workshop this year, and it's on excess. Excess is the low side of your type. Excess is what it looks like when you just keep hitting the pellet button over and over and over again, expecting to get the same results. Excess is the low side of your motive. And we like thinking about all of the elements of the Enneagram with high side and low side thinking. So this can apply to stance, high side, low side stance, to stress moves, to coping style. And here in this discussion, we are going to start with our center and what the low side of motive looks like. So this is a workshop. You're going to hear the voices of about 20, 25 people. This is the first of our workshops, and these are going to continue through 2026. If you are interested in joining us, the next one's free, and you can sign up at aroundthecircle.org. Appreciate you all, and may all good things be yours. Hey, Prince. Ingrid, I'm really excited for you to meet Katie. Katie, Ingrid, Katie.
Hey, girl.
Eric, nice to have you, boss. I'm thrilled you're here. Brendan, likewise. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
We're going to have a good morning today. Chantel, welcome.
Hi.
It's good to meet you. Where are you from?
I live in a small rural town just south of Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Excellent. Eric, where are you at, boss?
I'm out of Abilene, Texas.
Perfect. We got lots of Texans. Veronica, welcome back. We're going to have some ones, one power this time. Well, if you have not yet met Katie, Katie is in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hello, everybody.
Griffin, I'm thrilled that you made it, boss. Valerie Decker. Valerie is in the Bayou. Welcome. Lolly, welcome. I haven't met you yet. Where are you from, Lolly?
Hi, I'm from Biloxi, Mississippi.
Wonderful. Heidi is with us. Heidi is on the western slope of Colorado. Still, I assume?
Yep, that's right. Hi, guys. Good to see some
Whoa.
familiar faces in here.
Manis, I haven't met you yet. Where are you from, boss?
I'm from India. Hi. Hi, everyone.
Are you joining from India?
Yeah.
Katie, that's a win.
I've been listening to the podcast since COVID. It's been long. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Glad to
have.
be here.
I'm thrilled that you made it. What time is it in India?
8:30 p.m.
Oh, okay, good. It's not like getting up at 2 a.m. or something. Well, welcome. That means a lot to me that you joined us. So thank you. Delian, it's good to see you. I've already forgotten where you're at. I know this, but I forgot.
Oh, I'm in upstate New York. So if you know where the Finger Lakes are.
The Brits have joined us. Elliot Skinner is here.
Do I count as a Brit?
Transplant. You
Yeah,
can introduce yourself, I suppose, on that front.
Kiwi, and I'm currently joining you from Munich. So pick which part of the world you want me to be in. We've got it covered.
I'm thrilled that you're here, boss. Well, Tribe has assembled. Thank you so much. It means the world to me and to Katie that you made time this morning. I'm really hopeful that we're gonna have a good experience doing these. You may not know this, but today is my favorite holiday. Today is All Saints Day. Day to finish off the rest of your peanut butter cups from last night, which are the best of all the Halloween candy. And then light a candle for somebody who's gone before you. Remember that they're cheering for you, as that makes the world better. Welcome, Christine. I'm going to introduce myself to you in a second, but I'm thrilled that you're with us. We are going to talk excess and the low side of our motive today. And I'm going to just throw out a couple of things. For those of you who haven't done a Zoom with us before, again, just thrilled that you're here. Just kind of find your place in this. There's going to be a lot of back and forth and talking from kind of all corners. If you want to comment, I really would love to see as many comments, as possible as we're going. There's a button at the bottom that says react, and you can, I think there's a way to raise your hand. Isn't that right? The one thing is, given the number that we'll have, at least 20 some odd. If the more that you can make your comments concise, that just helps us get to as many people as possible. So, and that includes myself. One of the things we're going to be hitting excess, talking about each of the types, Many of the best questions aren't going to come from me or Katie. Most of the best questions are going to come from you all. Questions about yourself, your own type, but also questions about the types of others. And so if you really have something that kind of elevates the conversation, moves things forward, places where you're curious, would love to hear those as we're talking. And I am recording this, so just be aware that I'm probably going to share this on Patreon for those who couldn't make it. There's lots of folks that couldn't make it that wanted to hear about it. So with that in mind, am I missing anything, Katie?
I don't think so.
Rock and roll. We're going to get into this. If I didn't say hello when you entered, just know hello. I'm thrilled that you're here. We're going to jump in with just defining success. So you want to take the mic, Katie?
Defining excess.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I thought you said success for a minute. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I didn't plan for that. I was thinking about excess the other day when I was thinking about stress. I just finished an 8-week class here in Cincinnati, and we did a class on stress, and that made me start thinking about excess. So I think when your motive is not being met, so depending on what number you are, we all have a motive, right? When your motive is not being met, either in like a one-on-one situation, like a one-off situation, or you're just maybe in a period of time in your life where your motive is not being met. So as a 3, I'm walking around and I just don't feel valuable for whatever reason. I don't feel like people like me. I compare myself too much, all the things. Or I'm in a very specific situation where right now in this moment, I feel like the person across from me does not value me, right? Either of those two things. Your motive is not being met. I think you have 2 choices. I think that you can go into stress, which is where your normal tools don't work, right? Your normal tools don't work. You got to pick up some other tools. You go into stress. That's something different. That's not what we're talking about today. Or your brain convinces you that your normal tools will work if you just keep doing them. And that's when you go into excess. So for me, as a 3, performance is one of my tools, right? You all have different tools based on your number. Performance is one of my tools. So my brain, when I'm in excess, convinces me that if I could just perform a little more or be who this person wants me to be a little better, then I'll get what I want, which is to be valuable, right? And I just dig into it and dig into it and dig into it. And that's you in excess. When your motive's not being met and your brain thinks that your normal tools will still work, so you should just do them more, that's excess.
Wanted to share a story. Each of us, like I'm a 1, Katie's a 3. My oneness in excess comes out when I really push into overdoing action, and specifically when I shut down my thinking center. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but that's when I really know I'm in excess is I'm just setting aside thinking. I'm pushing real hard into getting things accomplished, and I live in that place of trying to get my motive fulfilled, as was said, by pushing into it over and over and over again. What can result for me as a 1 in excess is that I can become obsessive. I can start really being judgmental of other folks who aren't doing the things that I think they ought to be doing. That can be a place where I can become very angry at myself for not getting the things accomplished. I can get real rigid because my thinking process is set aside and I'm just going on feeling and intuition. And that anger at myself can emerge in that space. These are characteristics of excess. And excess, just to build on what Kay said, ends up being the move. You're not moving into stress. Your motive isn't necessarily being fulfilled. Sometimes I suppose it can be fulfilled, and you get into this cycle of just really pushing into your strategy for getting your motives in an unhealthy way, in a way that does damage to yourself and does damage to others. Those would be some ways of thinking about excess. It's really the place where your motive starts causing damage to yourself is in my view. And we'll unpack that for each of the types as we move. Do you have experiences of that, Katie?
Yeah, so what kicks into overdrive for me, I already said performance, but the big thing that kicks into overdrive for me when I'm in 3 is competitive comparison. That's how 3s walk through the world. That's how we see. And I know that I'm in excess because I start feeling like I'm losing friends. Either whether that if that's true or not, I start comparing myself to people and I am not happy being one of many. I need to be the best in the room and I need to be the funniest and I need to be the most charismatic and everybody needs to like me the most, which does not make me a good friend. And so I notice that I'm in excess when I start noticing that my relationships are faltering. And when I feel like I stop being happy for people in my life when they do better things than me. That's I don't want to say that out loud, but that's true. That's when I start. When I'm in excess in 3, I start losing my people is what happens to me.
One will note the target in both of our languages. And so many of you, I imagine, are familiar enough with your type that you'll know where I'm going here. Each of us have a dominant center. 8s, 9s, and 1s are in the body center. And our target is something like control or agency. And that's what we're striving for. And just keep that in your mind if you're an 8, 9, or 1, or 11, 8, 9, or 1. For 2s, 3s, and 4s, as Katie was saying, that the comparison that's there and the desire for attention is there in terms of validating one's value and sense of self. That target is going to be rich for the 2s, 3s, and 4s. And for 5s, 6s, and 7s who are coming to the world looking for predictability and anticipating what's to come, that desire for safety, security will be a primary target. And so the language of target here can be real valuable in terms of your type is defined by its strategy for achieving that target, and even defined by the fact that you want that target more than anything else. Excess is going to come into play there. Excess is going to come into play in terms of our strategy ramping up to an unhealthy place. One thing that I would love to mention on this front as well is that, and you'll see this in my work in particular as we're moving forward quite a bit, is that we are made up of heart, mind, and body. You might be a head type, but you still have emotions, obviously, and you still have a body. We have that balance of those 3 centers, head, heart, and body. Excess, it seems to me, here would be another definition, is really characterized by an overemphasis for most of the types on their primary center and a real neglect of their repressed center. So this is true for all the types except for 3s, 6s, and 9s, which I'll talk about in a second. But for all the other types, we are overemphasizing the targets, values, strategies of our primary center and our repressed center. So for me, I'm thinking repressed. 1s, 2s, and 6s are thinking repressed. 4s, 5s, and 9s are action repressed. 3, 7s, and 8s are feeling repressed. For each of the types, we elevate the primary need of our dominant center, and our repressed center is set severely aside. It's going to be a lot of the angle, at least I'm going to take today. I want to set up 3, 6s, and 9s. Katie, you may be able to speak to this. You will be able to speak to this better than me. There is the move that your primary center as a 3 is also your repressed center. That is, as a 3, she takes in the world through her heart, but doesn't engage the world through her heart. Can you talk about how excess flows for you in that space?
Yeah. So if anyone has ever heard Joey Shuey talk about processing centers, that's what I'm about to talk about. But 3, 6s, and 9s, we start in one center, but we do not trust that center to get us what we want. And so we switch to the center that's at the end of our stress line. It is not a stress move, but you switch to the center at the end of your stress line. So a 3, I go up into action. 6s, you're going to go over into feeling. And my 9s, you're going to go over into thinking. And then that's the center that we really, really overdo. So for 3s, I start in feeling. I do not trust my ability to connect with you to get me what I want, which is attention. What I do trust is my ability to perform what I think you want and do something about it. So I really, really overemphasize action. 6s, you really value information. You start there, but you don't trust the information to get you what you want, which is security. So you go over into feeling and you start checking in with everybody else. And that makes you feel more secure, right? So you really overdo connection. And then my 9s, you see what needs to be done. You have this autonomy, right? But you don't trust your ability to do to get you what you want. And so you go into thinking and you start to think about everything, and you become very logical about things. You try to think your way through things, right? So we all switch. Counterclockwise? Is that counterclockwise? Yeah, we all switch counterclockwise, one center. And then that's the center that you're really, really overdoing.
We will unpack all of those more, but that's our setup. So now we're jumping into talking shop. Actually, that's our setup. I suppose we could open it up. Any questions, thoughts, clarifications, anything worth saying before we jump into each of the types?
Jeff, can you tell us what we're doing next?
We're going to take each number one by one and just kind of slowly move through them. But the setup is just defining excess. Rock and roll. Well, let's start with the ones. I'm going to put something up. This is just for the sake of definitions and just kind of getting something to talk about. I'll share it for a minute and I'll move it down as we talk. But the thing about ones is ones are going to overdo action and they're going to step away from real reflection. Again, elevating the primary center, dismissing or not really engaging that repressed center, which is their head. And so with that combination, it's obvious you're going to see a kind of a tightening of their desire for control, their desire for movement. You're going to see a whole lot less patience, teachability, and trust when ones are in excess. Here's the thing that I really want to emphasize with all the types is like, what are the buzzwords? What are the emotions? What are the signs that you are moving into excess? These are the things that I actually would love for you to write down, if nothing else. For myself, and I suppose for other ones, I assume, is that ones know they're in excess when they are pushing into those spaces where they're becoming rigid, where you feel yourself becoming rigid, where you feel that emotion of self-scorn or anger at yourself. The obsessiveness that ones can experience. Again, obsessiveness is going to come out of just not thinking about things clearly and with wisdom and just go kind of posture that ones can get into. Resentment comes into play here, especially when others aren't keeping up with your obsessions. Isolation can be a real negative side to ones in excess because of how they posture and because of that singular action pursuit. And to bring in the passions, that wrath at themselves can be seen when we're in excess. I'm going to use examples at the end. These come from Steph Barron Hall's work. One of the examples she gives is that, ones can feel like they're in excess when they feel like every problem is theirs to solve. So a couple of thoughts there. Do you have anything you want to build on with that, Katie?
No, I think you did a good job. I'm going to let the one talk about ones.
Thank you.
I'm interested to hear what other people say.
Thoughts or questions? And this, you don't have to be a one to comment on this. In fact, it can be the case that the best questions come from people who aren't this type in terms of, okay, what's the story here? Thoughts or questions on ones in excess?
Can I add something real fast before anyone goes?
Yeah.
I also would love to hear thoughts and questions. Also, if any ones have an example of you in excess, what that looks like for you, we would love to hear. We would love to hear that from everybody, by the way, as we go around the circle. If you have a good story of you in excess that would illustrate that for everybody else, feel free to share.
Light it up, Kelsey.
Okay, I was typing as we were talking because I am a verbal processor and I want to speak perfectly in a sense. So I relate a lot to being rigid, judgmental, and resentful when I'm in excess. But I'm noticing here recently, my red flag for excess is starting to do something that nobody actually asked me to do. And for example, I see this show up a lot with 6s, 7s, and dreamers in general. I'll hear them think through something or throw out this thing that they're dreaming about doing, and I automatically think that's my job to make it happen. Like, you've got the vision, I've got the execution, we can do this. And then when the dreamer loses speed, or if they change their mind, or if the plan changes, I'll get very angry at them and I'll label them as flaky. And I don't love this about myself. There's nothing wrong with the dreamers, the sixes, the sevens. They're wonderful. Solely speaking to my flaws in excess here. But what's really happening is that I was never asked to make a plan or to execute anything. And the dream was just them thinking out loud. So that would be my example. Actually, a more specific example, I recently tried to plan a girls' outing with a couple of friends, and they took way too long to reply. We couldn't all get on the same page. I couldn't control the outcome. And then a couple of people, once we settled on a date, backed out. And I was so angry with them because I'm thinking, you're flaky, you don't take this seriously, you are not a good friend. And again, I don't love that about myself. That's the rigidity and judgmental side of me as a one. So that's what I got for you.
That's great, Kelsey. Thank you.
That's very well said. Yeah. Do you have any responses to that, Katie?
No, I was just thinking because we're both action processors, I was thinking I related to a lot of that as well. Those were my thoughts. And I heard so I think, to give you all something else to think about, I think when we are in excess, our vice comes out really, really, really hard. So your vice, your passion, your sin, whatever that is, I can go through the list if anybody needs it. But for ones, it's anger or resentment, kind of depending on who you talk to. And that's what I heard, is I heard resentment. And I bet if, as other ones are going to talk, we will be able to hear resentment come up in their stories when they're in excess as well. Anyway, that's what I heard.
What I heard there, and it can be praiseworthy, is that ones are going to connect with others by pulling them into action. And it's like, oh, you're dreaming about this thing. Well, let's go do it, even though you weren't asked to. But it's the invitation for them to move forward with you. As you were saying, that can be a lonely space, especially if you keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, and then look back and nobody's with you. But excellent observation. So, any other thoughts, questions on ones? We're gonna get through all these, Katie. We're gonna get through them all. Twos. For type twos in excess, I have twos are going to reactively be overextending their emotional life and feelings and fail to think about what's behind their acts and measure the care that they're giving. This doesn't mean that twos can't care or that they shouldn't care. It's that measured care requires real direct thought. And so thinking about the care matters, but in excess, this will not, the thinking repression will kick in. The movement towards elevating the emotional life will get enhanced, and that's how the excess will work for the two. So we see this in the compulsive helping that can be aimed at, momentary affirmations, getting that kind of buzz from I've helped somebody and then I get the response, rather than the two actually stewarding their energies, stewarding their gifts, stewarding their assets and resources in order to do what's theirs to do, and really aiming the gifts that they have. So twos can know that they're in excess, in my view, when they sense that they're pushing into spaces of codependency, of more intrusiveness. If you see yourself moving into that space, which, by the way, wing that she has, heard that a little bit in Kelsey's language. The martyrdom that can come out in some of the two, language and posture, is a red flag. Manipulation as a strategy is a red flag. Feeling entitled, and that entitlement can come out of that, the passion there, that's pride for twos. And those are some of the ways for it to set up twos in excess. What do you think, Katie?
I'm going to give you twos another word, which I heard all over what Jeff just said, but I think something you can add to this is that you're going to know you're in excess when you get really self-righteous. I see twos. I think that's part of pride, but twos get really self-righteous. I know what's best. People, let me take care of you. I know what you need almost better than you do. Like that sort of thing. I think twos can lean heavily into when they are in excess. So twos, when you are thinking of examples, that might be a clue. When was the last time you felt really self-righteous, right?
Eric said the phrase that I've come to really like here is over managing relationships. Was that for twos or for ones?
And that's for twos, yes.
Okay.
In excess, so I also, just like everybody else, have a mother who is a two. And when she gets really in excess, there's a lot of over managing of relationships.
Fair. Ingrid, what do you say?
Well, I have a question for both of you. I have a two friend, and we're in a group where I'm a three. My other friend is an eight. And I noticed as a 3 and an 8, we're getting very, very difficult to keep that relationship going because she just keeps doing. And I don't know, is that it can twos, threes, and eights have a really good friendship? Or is there some kind of conflict there that's just going to be really hard to get over? Because
The
that's
two
what I
is
feel.
overdoing.
The two is overdoing it. It's like, and when we say something, we get that, but I'm the only one who can do it. And it's like, as much as, for example, she's a manager, and when the janitor didn't show up, she's cleaning the toilets instead of delegating, because she's like, well, I know how to do this. And I'm like, okay, but you're kind of overqualified for that job. And it's kind of a misuse of your salary. But when we say things, there's just a real pushback, like, I know what needs to be done. So I don't know if, as a three, what do I need to do as a three to engage well with the two?
I think we should turn that over to the twos, Jeff, unless you have something
Yeah.
to say.
Any twos want to speak to that in terms of I'm the only one that can do it? You will not
Mama.
be-
Well, I don't know. Like when somebody is, I'm sure I've done that. I'm positive I have. I'm just not sure how you would break through because for me, I also would move a little bit into that self-righteousness thing. Well, of course I have to do it because y'all aren't doing it. Like I might be overqualified, but I'm the only one that's going to step up into it. Have you talked to her about how that makes you feel when she does that?
Well, I think what I've said is I'm really worried for her because I think she's on the path to, like, going way beyond stress and just going into just, like, physically and mentally just disintegrating because it's just it's a constant thing. And so I've told her, I'm worried about you. And she'll say, yeah, I know, but I got to do this and I got to do that. And, so, I mean, part of me has to just let it play out the way it's going to play out.
Jackie, do you have any thoughts?
So I do have some thoughts. I think when I hear a situation like that, I think of like many people of many types that can do that. And I'm curious about an interpersonal example that gives the same type of dynamic of you guys sort of trying to maybe reason with this friend. Because I think when we're, if two very efficient people are trying to convince a person who feels like they have to take everything on to not do something, I don't really know if that's gonna go through because you guys aren't quite wired to think that if I do, I will get in that same type of way. So I guess I'm curious, is there an interpersonal example, friendship example that highlights the same type of dynamic of we're trying to reason with this person and they're not squaring up with us?
Yeah, I think maybe it comes back to that we really haven't had an opportunity to have interpersonal relationship any. I guess maybe that's a little bit of it too, is she's taken on so much that her two friends have kind of fallen by the wayside. She doesn't have time for us because, all
Because
of
of
the
things
other
that she thinks matters, right?
Yeah, so maybe it's kind of the idea, now that I'm talking about it as a three, I'm thinking I don't matter anymore because all of these other commitments matter more than this relationship.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. I think it's valid. And it's funny because when we explore things, we can see like what's actually underneath. I'm curious because you obviously can't how someone responds to feedback is based on how they're doing point blank period. But I'm curious if that's the actual feedback, what might change? Hey, we feel left out and we love you and we much prefer you spend time with us than have your head in a toilet.
That's good. Thank you. I think you gave me some good
help.
thoughts.
Delene, would you mind stating your comment, which I think is excellent?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So I have a few twos in my life, and I just happened to read Elizabeth Gilbert's recent memoir, and she has said that she is a two. And what I find really interesting is that if I tell a two that I'm in relationship with that they're doing any of those things that were listed, codependence, intrusiveness, martyrdom, manipulation, entitlement, and pride, they don't see it. They don't get it. They don't even like and it's been very difficult for me to say, okay, I don't know what's going on in you because what's happening inside of you must be very different than what's being experienced. And so what's going on inside of it too, that could be their own inner red flags versus what we see.
It's what very well said. I have thoughts. Jane, twos. I have thoughts on that.
Interpersonal panic is the first thing that comes to my mind. When somebody gives me feedback and I have not registered, honestly, that I'm doing things out of threat, I'm like, what are you talking about? If I have that low level background interpersonal panic and someone's like, can you sit what are you doing? I'm like, oh, that's how I know. I also think too, the from that list, martyrdom, that's been a little bit more like over time, but like that feeling for me, one thing I've had to tell myself over and over is like, if you are being honest in relationships, right? Because it's on the twos also, people can tell if you're dying. So if you feel like a martyr, something's not right. So that for me, in my personal world is interpersonal panic and feeling like this anxiousness and like that feeling of martyrdom.
My quick take on this, and this would apply to fives and eights, is that twos, fives, and eights, their energy is going outward so severely that the internal sometimes gets neglected, but especially for twos and eights. I may need to think about this with fives, but in terms of twos who are combating their shame, the energy to combat their shame is going outward. So their emotions don't matter. Your emotions matter because I'm going to gain the connection, attention, and validation that I desire by meeting your needs. But that means that there can be an invisibility to looking at one's own inner life. And it makes me laugh, Delian, that you're the one that bring this up because I imagine it's the opposite for the four whose eyeballs go inward in terms of their emotional life and really having a depthy understanding of it, perhaps to the neglect of the external at times. Last thoughts on twos on in excess on this one.
So I was thinking that I think that you could tell if I was in excess if you looked at my message app on my phone, my outgoing messages. So if I'm feeling like when I get in, for me, it's this feeling of, because as a two, you get a lot of like, you're so great. You're such a great friend. Like, I mean, yeah, that even sounds awful for me to say it.
It's
but
true.
it's
You are
Not at all.
friends.
you know, and so, but then if I get in, my shame comes when I'm like, oh, y'all don't know. If you really knew what I was like, then, and then I can get in that spiral. And when that happens, I start sending out messages to people, checking in, like, and that is my way of saying, do you still love me?
Yep.
And I have a friend that's on this call right now, and I'm like, I'm hoping he doesn't feel like that's the only reason I ever reach out, and it's not. But that is what happens. I manufacture reasons to reach out to somebody in order to get a response back that you still do love me and I still do matter to you.
It's very well said, and it's an outstanding insight into this is how this manifests. That's beautiful.
Can I add
Uh,
one thing about twos? I think twos and threes have some of the hardest time to just get into the Enneagram because we're built off of shame. And unlike fours, we're trying to run away from it as fast as possible. So I think we all have a moment in our Enneagram journey that's really, really hard for us, all numbers. Twos and threes, it's right at the beginning. So because admitting your Enneagram number is admitting that you have bad things about yourself, which twos and threes are constantly trying to not face, right? In different ways, but that's what we're doing. So right away, twos and threes are going to have some pushback to, I don't want to hear these things about myself, right? So that's going to make it harder, I think, for twos and threes to actually get into it and be honest. Like, I think, especially twos, they're interested because it lets them know about you, right? And that's fun and all the things. But to be really, really honest about themselves and what's going on is like one of the biggest barriers that they're going to have in their entire journey. Just to be, I think I brought that up to say, like, to have, I'm a three, so this feels weird, to have a little empathy for the twos. Because I just like, we all have that big moment, right? For twos, it's at the very beginning, which makes it harder, right? So that's why I wanted to bring that up.
Mhm. The sevens may want to join you in that little circle at some point
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
true. That's a good point.
But that's excellent. Speaking of the threes, all right. So I put the notes in the chat if you want to see these. But threes in excess are going to overdo action. This was teased by Katie ahead of time in terms of where you use it. We're going to use processing center, and threes are going to process with action. But a lot of their excess seems to come out in the action oriented side and not the feeling oriented side, because in overdoing action, they're actually neglecting the value of their emotional life, the dignity of their emotional life. Sometimes 3, 7s, and 8s are not elevating the inherent worth of emotions and what those say about yourself, your experience as a human being in the world. And the push for 3s is the achievement. So this can obviously take the form of something like self-deception or even a betrayal of one's own inner life in order to sustain a different kind of appearance in the world. So there's like what's going on inside in terms of your authentic emotions and rich experiences as a human being, but those don't always sell. And sometimes the external has been manufactured in such a way that others see something different than what's in the heart of the three. Threes can know that they're in excess when they sense they're pushing into something like masking or vanity, restlessness. Image maintenance is a red flag. Overcommitments can come into play. Like, why are you committing to another thing? And then the passion is self-deception. And the example from Steph Barinhall, who is herself a 3, consciously adapting so much that it becomes difficult to identify my true sense of self. What you see there, Katie?
Well, I really want to hear from the other threes in the thing. So I'll just add something very quickly. The example that we just said, subconsciously adapting so much that it becomes difficult to identify my true sense of self. I think this is one of the things, like, other people may see us having trouble identifying our true sense of self, but to a 3 in excess, the thing that we are projecting is our sense of self. Like, we don't think we're having a hard time getting to our true sense of self. This awesome person you see in front of you, that is my true sense of self. Like, that's her. So I stop even recognizing that there's other things to me. I say I start kind of seeing myself as like a bag of personality traits instead of like a whole person. And I stop remembering that that's not normal, I think.
I-
But I
I
want to
would-
hear, I want to hear from other threes.
I'm actually going to ask you a question on this
Yeah.
just to clarify, because it feels real similar to what we just said about twos in terms of a lack of self
Yeah.
understanding. Where's the difference between these two numbers?
Well, I think I keep bringing up our vices. For twos, it's pride. For threes, it's self-deceit, it's deception.
But I say that I think for twos, it's people pleasing. They really truly want to make the other person happy or fill their needs. I think for me, I think a three is that I want validation.
Yeah.
It's not, I want it to feel like if our relationship is good and we're not in conflict, that it's validating me, and I always thought it was people pleasing. I don't think it's people pleasing for a three. I think
Yeah.
it's validation for a three.
Yeah. That's a great point. I was struggling because, like, at the end of the day, we both twos and threes think that we're a different person than we are, right? It just happens in different ways. So that's why I was struggling, because like at the base it's sort of the same. But Ingrid, I think that's a phenomenal point. And Jeff, again, to what you said, it's like where the energy is going, right? Or twos are pouring it all into you. Threes want a little bit of it back. But the problem is that we both can't admit who we actually are. Twos can't admit that they have needs. Threes can't admit that they have parts of them that they're trying to hide, right? We can't admit those things. Because that's like our whole thing, right? That would require so much like embarrassment and shame and opening up the whole shame spiral and all the things. Like that would require so much, right? To admit that you are not this person you think you are.
It's well said. Thoughts or questions on threes in excess?
Well, I can give a little bit of a story for me that it was in excess, because I always thought as a three, I didn't value relationships, and because they always say it's the heart, and twos, threes, and fours value relationships. And I realized I had to go to an AT&T store because they made a mistake, and I was stressing out so much, and I realized that even for me, the relationship with that person, like I didn't want to look like I was being argumentative. When I had a need for this to be fixed, but for me, I thought I want that person to like me. I don't want to walk in feeling I'm being argumentative or disruptive, or and so to me, that's when I realized I was valuing the relationship with that repair person or that customer service person more than what I needed done. And so I spent a whole evening just stressing out about, I think, how is this going to work and how can I say it nicely? So when I value a relationship more than what I need, I know I'm in stress.
Is it not the case that in that relationship, the person in front of you is kind of telling you who you are, though, at some
Right.
level, and that's
They're
really
telling
the
me
target?
I'm an argumentative person, or that I'm not
Yeah.
a nice person. And that's what they're telling, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that you're not a nice person. You're not and I had a late partner that I could pull on him and say, you go in and do it, because it's okay if you're a nasty person. It's okay if you're argumentative, because I can sit back and get the reward of it without actually doing it myself.
That's great.
Can I just say something? My sister's a three. She identifies as a three. And what's really hard, so I have a lot of respect for her and all threes, is you're talking about self-deception, but it's hard because it's all true. When we're in a conversation, she can do anything. She can make magic happen out of, so the deception is so, it's like true. So it's like it's a different deception is, I think deception, like you're telling a lie, but it's more like negating the reality that you're a valuable human, not because you can make magic happen from nothing or spin gold out of straw. It's, I guess, hearing what you guys were saying, I think that was hard for me because I was like, okay, but I have to think about deception, I guess, more as deceiving herself, that the reason that she deserves to be around is because she can make magic happen.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So maybe we should talk about self-deception as it's not that I'm lying, I can do all these great things, right? Because this feels weird to see as a three. But I agree with you. Threes are capable of really great things, right? We're all capable of really great things, but threes do that. I think the deception part is, and all this negative other stuff behind me, that doesn't exist, right? Like all this stuff, all this positive stuff is true. Look at this, right? I think the deception comes in. I wonder if you have any thoughts about your sister about this. The deception is, and all that other half of me, like, don't worry about it. That doesn't exist, right? The deception is I don't want to look at the negative.
Yeah, I would think, I think that does help. And also that, like, I don't have feelings.
Yeah.
That part. Okay.
Yeah, that's the deception.
Seems to me that it's a strategy for, again, to overcome shame. And the difference between twos and threes kind of comes out here in terms of how they're addressing shame, where it's the two's energy completely going outward. But as you were saying, Katie, there's a both and for the three, and the feeling repression that the three will have in this space, you can easily just shut that down through self-deception. Is a fantastic tool for shutting down a sense of inward shame, I assume. John and Becca, you're thrilled that you guys got a crew there.
I was
that
just
came
about
out.
to call them out. Morehouse family, I
Just-
see you.
This is making me so happy. Do you have thoughts on this?
They have 2 threes, by the way.
Two threes.
Mommy and daughter are both threes.
I just came in from yoga, so I do not look at me, which is so three of me to say. But I was going to say that one of the things that, like, literally we talked about in yoga today was preparing to rest for winter. Like, how can we, let things go, and what parts of you can you let go so that you can rest during winter? And I was like, nothing, obviously. Like, I have all the things I need to do. All of these things are important to me. I've filtered out all the stuff that's not important, and I need to do all these things. So, like, imagining letting go of something to prioritize myself and my rest this winter is, like, incongruent with, I mean, it's something I need to do, obviously, but it's, like, incongruent with the way my mind was working. And so I was just taking measure of that, and then you guys were talking about, like, being difficult to identify my true sense of self. I'm like, why would I rest? All of these things are what make me up, rather than, like, if you take all the things away, like, I don't know who I am, which is terrifying to admit, but that's kind of what I was thinking. And then the other thing I was laughing about is how my mom, and I'm going to tell the story on her, but my mom will often send in my dad to do stuff, just like Ingrid was saying, is like, I needed a package with my medicines, and my dad went in to give the package to the man, and the man got so upset because you can't send medicines through the mail or whatever. But anyways, then my dad ended up being the bad guy. My mom, like, wasn't the bad guy in that instance. So it just was funny laughing about that. But yeah, anyways, sorry, kind of rambled.
The one thing that I'm reflecting on my story, and I think this is where it ties in. We had a chapter when the kids were really young that we lived in what I called the buckle of the Bible Belt for 7 years. And when we left and we came to Cincinnati, I remember having this sense of, like, oh my God, I'm, like, rediscovering myself. There were so many parts of myself that I had to put on mute and tuck away and not let come to the surface because they didn't mean anything. They didn't translate into that culture and weren't valued. And so I just remember these strange little aha moments of, like, going to a program at the kids' school here, and, like, I could wear a fleece and jeans, which was what was true to who I am. But I hadn't been able to do that for 7 years. And so I just remember this very clear journey for a couple of years of, like,
I am remembering who I am, like trying to call those things that were more authentically myself back to the front and to the day-to-day existence. So I don't know if that resonates but in those years of being away, I wanted to be able to connect and be of value to people, and me bringing up stories of like, having gone on an outward bound in Canada or whatever, different things like that. It was like, it's not connecting. Got to try something else.
Yeah, throw that away.
So
The idea that a type would need to rediscover themselves is really important to say here. The idea that so much didn't transfer into the culture that I entered is showcases how much threes use others as a mirror at times. The idea that if you take all these things away, I don't know who I am. All that really speaks to the way the three is in the world. Very helpful. So lots of great language there is what I saw. Last words on threes. Griffins, you're in the buckle of the Bible Belt still.
Yeah, I've got two thoughts. One on that last point, like I mistyped as a 7 for probably 3 years because I think I was in a space that really liked 7s. So like that, I resonate with that a bunch. I was thinking though earlier, and I almost talked when my dog was going crazy, the delivery guy. We talk about like excess being when your motive starts to do damage to yourself. And I'm wondering, like, for 1s and 2s, the damage felt like it might be like relational, like there might be some tension here. It doesn't, I guess I'm struggling to see how that hurts them as a person. But I look at this and I think about myself and I'm like, okay, when I push really hard into performance and I start like ignoring all the worst, ugliest parts, those things that's starting to really, they get worse. And that feels like active damage to me, not necessarily even to the relationships. And I'm wondering, like, that might be, maybe that's a feeling repression thing. Maybe that's, I don't know what to do with it yet, but that is all like swirling. Like that feels like more acute damage to a single person, to the person in the type, rather than like kind of relational network damage in the 1s and 2. I don't know what to do with that, but
in terms of like what the 1 and 2 are experiencing in terms of damage when they are entering excess.
Yeah, I think so.
Versus,
I think it damages them the same is what I would say. Just watching my mother be a 2 through her life, right? Losing yourself completely in another person. I haven't really seen you do that, Mom. Sorry. Other 2s, right? Losing yourself completely into another person, that damages you, right? Because where does that person start and where do I begin? 1s, losing yourself into anger and like that doesn't feel right. Like that destroys you as well, like your heart, right? So I do think it damages all of us equally.
I know this is, I have a couple folks in my life who come from generational trauma, and one is a 1 and one is a 2. So just speaking to like actual bodily damage, the 1 tries to portray perfection so much that it's caused all these health issues. And then the 2 has neglected their own needs so much that now their house is overrun. Somebody needs a place to stay, they're staying there. They don't have food for themselves. It ends up coming into like very tangible, harmful effects to them when they're in that space. And it ends up translating into bodily harm in some ways, or like self-harm in some ways.
agreed. It may be the case that when talking about stance, this could come into play when talking about damage. So for 1s, 2s, and 6s, reactive types, there's going to be an earning posture. Earning can get severely out of control as it's seeking its target. So for the 2, I think that's a great example. Like if you're earning the love and affection that you desire, that can get severely out of control in terms of self-neglect, in terms of losing resources, and in terms of just not knowing who one is in the world and what their sense of self and what theirs to do is. Similarly, the earning that can come in ones can be, I mean, in your phrasing there, I thought what I was hearing was like there can be kind of a narcissism there that isn't often expressed about ones, in terms of like seeing themselves as something gross that needs to be transformed into something better. That can be the earning posture of self betterment you can see in ones, and that can get gross in a different kind of way. I can imagine ones leading their home and just being overly obsessed about how things go in their house, that literally destroys their relationship with other family members because of their obsessiveness. That would be another way that might be expressed. So all sorts of damage to go around, Griffin, on these friends, in terms of how excess can sabotage one's happiness. We haven't brought up happiness, but happiness will be a very important category at some point. Last thoughts on threes?
Sorry, could I speak to that one as well?
Yeah, please.
Just because I think there's maybe a bit of a misconception that ones don't think about relationships that much, or it's only people who are in the heart center that really care about relationships. But I know quite a few ones who really value the relationship, but it's that sense of, I have to do what is right, or I have to say what is right. And when you're in that space of excess, there's that constant battle going on inside of, I love this person, but I can't stop myself from doing this thing. Or I just feel like I spend so much time thinking about people and what is the right thing to do within relationship, but I want to love them. It's just this constant battle of, I need to stop myself from interjecting something that is that kind of control. So I feel like there's just been a lot of work from it, but I just thought it was important to address that ones spend a lot of time thinking about relationships as well. And it is that tension that we face of trying to do what is right, but trying to maintain those relationships as well.
Well said. My notes on fours are that type 4 in excess is going to overindulge their feelings. So as opposed to twos whose attention, relational energy going outward, there's a lot of internal energy for the 4. So that overindulgence of feelings comes here and leads to an absence of embodied pursuits. So the action repression is going to come in for the 4 here. And we see this in emotional circling that's aimed at depth rather than in engagement, bringing something good, something beautiful into the world. Fours can get stuck, the emotions of it all. So fours can know that they're in excess when they sense that they're pushing into melancholy, envy, there's the passion, self-absorption, longings that aren't going to get met. And there can be a place of alienation here. You'll notice over and again with some of the descriptions that there can be some language about being alone that results from our move into excess. Well worth noting that in excess, even if our excessive side pushes for relationships, it can be something that sabotages us in our relationships, and we actually end up being by ourselves. So do you got anything you want to build on that, Katie?
Because I've been talking about vices a lot, I'm interested to see how envy shows up in you here. And if you know what you're envious of, I'm wondering if as you go deeper into 4, it becomes more ambiguous what you're envious of, or it becomes more defined. Like you can say, yes, that personality trait is what I'm envious of. Or if it gets more ambiguous than that, I'm just envious of everything. I'm interested to hear how that kind of works as a 4.
I guess I would say it starts out pretty specific. I mean, this is something I'm reviewing on a daily basis. What am I envious of? So I'm very familiar with like the specifics of that. And then I think when a particular relationship is in the focus of this, it starts to spread out and get a little bit more diffuse. And I don't know, I guess I could tell a story that I think hits on a bunch of this stuff, but I want to make sure Delian gets a chance too, if you want to hop in. Okay. I was thinking really hard about how I could come up with a story that wasn't like disgustingly personal. And then after a certain point, I gave up because I realized my brain just doesn't store any other kind of information. And so I was thinking about this trip that I recently took with my type 3 friend, best friend from college. First time we'd ever traveled together. So I kind of had a sense that this could get a little dicey at some point. I was interested to see how that was going to go. And one of the first things I noticed is like, okay, yep, she's calling home. She's calling to talk to her kids. I saw this coming. Like, yes, she has children. She's going to want to talk to them. This is a sore spot for me. I do not have children. I always thought I was going to have children. I'm very preoccupied with the fact that she has children and I do not. She sounds very happy talking to these children, and that is really bothering me. But I saw this coming. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And then somehow we're going out into different situations, restaurants, things like that. And somehow she's working it into every conversation. Did you know that I am the mother of amazing children? And I'm like, okay, image builder, like, I see what's happening here. And I was still trying to convince myself, it's like, okay, I saw this coming. Like, I live with this. This is our friendship. This has been the story for like the last 15 years. Like, I know what's going on here. And then there was one night toward the end of the trip where we were sitting like in the Airbnb living room, and of course, as I do, I was pouring out my heart about the not having of children and all of the other things that have ever gone wrong in my life and how that dooms my future, etc. And she picked up her phone and called her kid. And there was part of me that was like just shocked for a second. That just sort of sat there like, wait, what? And then it was time to withdraw. So I got up with my mopiest, darkest face and retreated to the bedroom of the Airbnb, and then realized that I didn't want to sit there and listen to perky type 3 voice on the phone talking to her kids. So I was like, well, I may as well just take a shower, get ready for bed. So I get in the shower and I'm like, okay, we withdrew. Now it is time to become very expressive. So how am I going to explain to her how deeply disrespected I feel, that I clearly am not important to her at all if she has done this to me in the middle of this conversation that I deeply valued? And I guess maybe the moral of the story is everybody go take a shower, because then it hit me like a load of bricks that she did tell me she was done with the conversation. She told me she was done with the conversation by picking up her phone to call her kid because she didn't have the courage to tell me to my face that I had overwhelmed her. And so once I kind of was able to zoom back out and realize this person like overall loves me, overall respects me, I realized that I had the space to let go of it. But I think that's what I see here in excess is that self-absorption piece, that inability to really see like her side of the story and to have the ability to zoom out and see the overall picture of our friendship, because in that moment the devastation of that one particular instance of disconnection was so overwhelming that if something hadn't created that pause, that interruption for me to go take a shower, I actually probably would have gotten us into a conversation that maybe didn't need to be had. Like, of course, I want to be connecting with people on an emotional level, and I do want to be able to tell my friends when they've hurt my feelings, but there's the overdoing of that I need you to know how everything makes me feel, that I can see how that becomes exhausting for people.
I love the zoning in and zoning out metaphor. I think that's great. That's all I have to say about that. I love that. Thank you for giving that test. Anybody, any other fours have any thoughts? Well, Jeff, do you have any thoughts about that before?
I did. I thought that was a lovely illustration of the point. I think this applies to everyone, but to center on fours, the thing that pings for us personally is really going to be type dependent at times, and that's what I hear it in the framing of the story, was that you're self aware enough to understand these are the things that matter to me more than perhaps others. And then when it came up in conversation, that's what elevated and causes, you know, some of the emotions that are associated with that to kick into gear. And what I heard was a healthy wrestling with that as opposed to like an excessive wrestling, but it does point to like, here's the road, here's the quick and easy path down kind of a fairly dark trail that you could venture, as well stated.
I would like to ask Delia if she agrees with this, but I would like to bring up the possibility of striking melancholy from this list because I don't see the problem here. Like this is just a Wednesday morning to me.
It has its place in the pantheon of rich and beautiful emotions.
Well, I wouldn't even say it has its place. I would just say that like this is the top 3. It's not going anywhere. Like
It also,
you know,
like,
maybe I could do
it's not just in
Yeah.
excess. It exists in you everywhere.
Yeah, this is kind of like the state of being, and I don't think it's intrinsically problematic. I think you know, melancholy in and of itself is not necessarily a deeply dramatic, or at least externally dramatic thing. So,
Yeah.
what do you think, Delia?
I really agree with a lot of that. I was just going through my head and doing like okay, so to me, 3s, I feel like performing is not a bad thing, right? That's probably an intrinsic way in which that's what I have heard from 3s in my life is that like, you know, and there's something really wonderful about that at times. And we could probably go through each of the numbers with that. Melancholy, yeah, like, oh, that's not going in. Like that's just a baseline for sure. However, in excess, what I find with my melancholy is that it becomes, and maybe that's a thing for a lot of these things, like envy, self-absorption, all of those things, uh, they're being weaponized. My shame is weaponizing those things now as a way for me to stay in non-movement. So that's what excess feels like for me. And yeah, like melancholy gets exploded, but it's not, I wouldn't say that that's one of those things that like, oh yeah, if a 4 is melancholic, then they're in excess. That would be pretty hard to say for sure. But yeah, everything you said, Heidi, spot on. Spot on.
Struck from the list. It's on my notes. Done. It may be the case that one that I am, I don't like going into melancholy, that I associate that with my stress move. So clearly put it on my list of things to avoid. Just so I honor and think apt the idea that, and this is good for understanding the heart of 4s, that if you want to say this is a place that a description of where I dwell frequently. Is it frequently, or do you say this is just underlying melancholy all the time?
Pretty baseline.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, agreed.
Can I say something on that? Because I work, there's only one 4 on the planet, it's you guys, but I work with a lot of 4s, and I'm noticing in all of these descriptions that like a lot of what we see, melancholy, envy, self-absorption, longing, alienation, like those can be everyday things. And I think it's like, does it go up this way or that way? And so like, I wonder if melancholy on a not so good day and not neutral and not every day could still qualify as this list. Like, I wonder if this list could still sort of stand as it is, but be on a scale, because I found the same thing with 1s, with 2s, with 3 so far, that like these can also be everyday normal behaviors, like to Heidi's point in her story, that you just catch yourself in. It's what we do with things that we're just predisposed to doing. So I guess I'm curious, like, would melancholy still make the cut and be every day if it was mismanaged and that was the thing that led to excess? Does that make sense? Or maybe I'm not.
I guess I see melancholy as a little bit more of an emotional tone. And then things like envy, that's the spikiness that can kind of stem out of that on a bad day.
Does that sense of longing not exist otherwise, and like not, okay, maybe not. No, I don't want to, but no, thank you for answering my question.
I have a quick thought that yes, melancholy feels like baseline, but when melancholy becomes sorrow, that's when I'm in my excess.
So it's funny because when I'm working with 4s, we talk about this funny pipeline of they're like depth and dwelling are a hair away, but dwelling and overwhelm, I mean, they're like they're like sisters, like they're always together. So I appreciate that language, like the melancholy and sorrow, and yeah, I appreciate that.
Is it? I suppose I'm re-examining the phrasing that excess is about pushing into said emotions. Is there a difference between experiencing melancholy and like actively pushing into melancholy in your hearts?
I would say for me, it is. I think melancholy is the hardest one on here for me to be like, oh yeah, that's when I'm in my excess. Envy is much higher. And maybe it's like when envy starts driving, melancholy gets a louder voice. Go ahead, Heidi.
When I think of melancholy, I imagine myself on a crisp fall day walking past some golden aspen, thinking about all of the people who are no longer in my life and how tragic that is. And so to me, none of this is problematic. This is fine. Again, this is just your average Wednesday morning. The problematic part is when I start thinking about like how great my ex's life probably is now, or like the friendship that I messed up back then, but they just couldn't really accept me for who I was. And like when I really like try and grab hold of the shame points within the melancholy and like start pulling everything back out of those knots. So like there's to me nothing wrong with acknowledging. Again, it's like I'm always going to be kind of living in the past to some extent. We're working on this, but like the past is a story that is full of all kinds of tragic twists and turns. And if I'm really like appreciating my past for the beauty that it is, that includes all of those tragic twists and turns. And I don't want to like miss out on getting to feel my life. So I'm going to feel all that stuff too. And how could I not be melancholic if I'm thinking about my past? So that I think that's where the disconnect is for me in terms of melancholy being my status quo. But I can see how, yeah, to me, it's like it's the baseline. And then these other things that we described on the list are where it starts to go south. And it can start to go south easily. And that is sort of the knife edge, kind of like Jackie was saying, of the depth versus the dwelling. And that is that knife edge. Is like we're walking on melancholy and it can easily slip down into something else. But the melancholy in and of itself is, in my mind, not a bad thing.
No, it's not. I think everything that we are is neutral and like we can choose to go up or down from there. So I appreciate that. Thank you guys for answering my question.
Gonna land the plane on this one. Normally, what we'll do is, and I'm gonna send out an email to y'all, and I would love your feedback on what you like, don't like about these times. But landing the plane with fours here, we're normally gonna go an hour and a half, and then spend half an hour on the backside if you want to stick around and just banter about open topics and Enneagram and just want to talk shop. We'll set aside a half hour, and so these would just be 2 hour portions. We could go much longer if you're desirous of that, and really just cover like all the types in depth at the ways at this level, or to start us off, just breaking it up into two seems wise. I do want to give a quick shout out to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on this as well, and just set up like it would be awful if we were like, here's your worst self in excess and not have any, solutions, as it were, solution oriented. But I'm an improver. Do you know this, Katie? It's a thing. The, as with the fours, the thing that ought to be elevated again for the fours alongside the rich emotional life, there is again the stuckedness that can take place in the being in the emotions and not moving into action, productive action that is paired with excess there as well. This will be true of fives. So for those of you who are fives, it'll be very similar yet opposite, where fives can get stuck in their thinking about a topic and never actually engage and build and move. That's worth naming. For sixes, like the threes, it's not that they're stuck in their thinking. It's actually that there's going to be an overuse of relational responsiveness and, moving out of mental clarity into that space where the needs and imagined threats are affecting not only yourself, but those around you. The seeking of relational support, looking for others to support, these can be the places of excess. And so it's again, six is taking in the world through their head and yet pivoting to their processing center, which is their emotions. That's worth naming. And I would love to talk in depth about that next time. For sevens and eights are both going to be feeling repressed. And so for the seven, it's overthinking what's next at cost of not doing actual business with their rich and valuable emotional life. And for the eights, it's going to be that over amplifying of the need for personal control and agency at cost to their empathy for others, but also their empathy for their own self and their own hearts and their own emotional life. That's worth talking about. And then lastly, for nines, real similar to fours and fives, nines are going to numb and though they're taking the world through their body center, not engaging the world through their body, they likewise are pivoting to their processing center, which is thought. And so that thought is going to be seen, elevation of thought and excess is going to be thinking about how they can keep things static, how they can keep everything calm, how they can think about your emotions and how they can merge. All these things are well worth talking about. So that's where we'll go with fives through nines next time, and maybe some things worth thinking about there. Questions or thoughts, and then I'm going to pitch one other thing in terms of solutions. But any questions or thoughts about fives through nines before we kind of land?
I think that it's worth thinking about and go with more detail more or later about some of the physicality of the body center, like as an eight, physically controlling the space, physically in excess, and that kind of thing.
Agreed. That's a good point.
I do, Suzanne Stabile, and I don't know if this came from her, talks about orientation to time. And I don't know if that can also be added in when it comes to talk about the numbers. You know what I mean?
Absolutely can be.
Does that throw you back, or I'm not really sure how that plays.
Let's just do it with sixes. Sixes are going to take in the world through their head center, which is a future focused center, but they're going to respond to the world with their in the present because they're a responsive reactive type. And so the movement taking place for a six is going to have that dynamic of what is it that's going to happen and pushing into anticipation and predictability. That is the filter, but it becomes very present oriented in execution. And so for sixes, it's right now we need to solve the future problem. Right now we need to solve the future problem. Fives don't do that. Fives take in with the same filter. Here's what I can predict. But they are going to use past resources to engage their fears. And so what do I know? What have I accumulated? What have I stored up in my bank account? Who are the people who are on my team that I've invested in? Those are the resources I'm going to pull from in order to pivot towards meeting the fears I anticipate. Sevens are going to do the opposite in that sevens likewise, same exact filter. Here's the things that are coming up tomorrow that cause me anxiety. But the seven moves immediately towards future tools. Okay, where do I jump next then? There's got to be somewhere better than here. This stuff is going to get me if I stay here. And the way that the tools, past, present, and future, work in our stance, independent stance, aggressive stance, is future tools, withdrawn, 4, 5s, 9s, past tools, 1s, 2s, and 6s like us, Christine, doing stuff in the moment. That is well worth naming and will wrap itself up in that excessiveness. The excessiveness can come into play in those spaces. You will notice that this is my favorite topic to talk about. Thank you for the opportunity to give me the microphone. I'll take that. Tell you something I know. Okay. Something worth working on between now and then. Stabile, who's been referenced a handful of times, notes that if you're going to do one thing, do stance work. And by that, she means name your stance in your unproductive center. So if you're a 4, a 5, or a 9, stance work for you looks like getting into your body, doing those things that engage your body, that get you moving. These can be there's a whole list of things that we could talk about in terms of what are best practices for getting into your body, but even having the reflection yourself of what are the things that I habitually need to adopt that get me into my body. That's really valuable. What I want to do next time is, and do this for all the types, is talk about 3 virtues that are like part of a traditional list. And for those who are in the withdrawn stance, the thing that one could really focus on is you need courage. Courage is putting into practice the demands of wisdom. You are already wise about your thinking, you're wise about your emotions. Putting into practice the things you feel, putting into practice the things you think, that is primary for you to be a holistically embodied person, for you to elevate your repressed center. And it will, in so doing, diminish the excess. Because like when you put emphasis on your repressed center, what naturally happens is the energy going towards excess in your primary center is going to come down, and that leads to balance. And in my view, balance is a primary for what it looks like to be a whole person here. For those of you who are 1s, 2s, and 6s, what we need is wisdom. You need to think about how to do productive thinking. You need to engage the tools that get your mind doing real reasoning. This is not unproductive thinking, chaining, spinning out, verbally processing. That doesn't count. Real thinking means I'm intentionally getting my mind focused on what matters most, doing those practices that lead to wisdom. My favorite quote on this is that wisdom is the art of knowing what to overlook. It means wisdom is about focus. It's focusing on what's most valuable, most essential. For 2s, apply that to your relational life. 1s, apply that to your action life. And 6s, apply that to your relational life and what you need to do in terms of support and the rest. And what wisdom will also say is this is where you turn off the spigot. You're an earner. Earn enough and then no more. Very valuable for 1s, 2s, and 6s. And then for 3, 7s, and 8s, the virtue is moderation. Moderation means a balancing, but for 3, 7s, and 8s, it means a moderating of your emotional life. And your emotional life matters, as value, your dignity and significance in large measure comes out of the fact that you and you alone as a human being experience certain feelings and sense of self, and coming into contact with that, elevating, what it is that is in your inner life and giving it weight matters. And moderation means giving it that weight and pulling back from what so often can be that, assertive, independent stance, really getting into your emotional life, giving it value. That can be a outstanding move. So we're going to talk quite a bit about that in the future, but that's my quick word in terms of where we're going. Katie, what did I miss?
I don't think you missed anything. I'll add something to connect moderation and orientation to time is a 3. One of my signs that I'm in excess for myself is if I'm too far in the future. So if I'm thinking about who I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's a sign for me to like pull it back and think about next week. Cause it's so easy. My mama can attest to this. It's so easy for me to focus on, well, where do I want to be 2 years from now? And she's like, don't you have a problem that you need to solve this week? Right. And that's real. When I'm in excess 3, that's really hard for me. So the moderation also to me feels like a pulling that back, right? Like being where I am right now in this moment and not running away into the future. That's what it feels like. Is the further ahead I am, the more I know that I actually need to be where I am right now. Yeah, and my fiance is a 9. I think he would say the same thing as our 4s. I see him, the more he goes in excess, the more he goes back. He'll start thinking about things that happened to him when he was a kid, when he was a teenager, like further and further and further versus just being here right now and solving his problems right now. So we go like this.
What we're saying in terms of how time, like focusing on those orientations to time that aren't natural to you, can be very valuable. So maybe unhealthy for you to stick in the future. Might be real helpful for a 2 to focus on the future a little bit, or for a 9 to focus on the future. That's a good word. So with that said, we're going to do an hour and a half of content, and then it's just going to blow open for question and answers. If you need to go, you're more than welcome. Just know that we love you and are very, very grateful that you spent your Saturday with us. But with that, open questions. Anything on your mind that's just burning Enneagram wise that you're like, this needs to get talked about? Hey friends, it's Jeff. We're entering a new season. We have started 4 new podcasts on this channel and are working on our second book and hoping to elevate more voices in the Enneagram world over the coming year. If these episodes are important to you, there's 3 things you can do for us. First, you can buy a copy of our first book, Around the Circle, on Amazon for yourself and your 10 closest friends for Christmas. Second, you can review that book or our podcast with a note, 5 stars. This really helps people find our feed. And best of all, you can go sign up as a member at aroundthecircle.org. Even free members get half of the stuff that we post there. So go. Books, stars, memberships. This will allow us to create great content for years to come. Appreciate all you all. Appreciate your notes of encouragement, and may all good things be yours.